Heading into the Duke football bye week and a stretch here without Duke basketball prior to the start of a new season. A lot of things to dive into today here on Locked On Blue Devils.
Hi, everybody. Dick Vitale. Hey, make sure you listen, man, to Locked On Blue Devils with J.J. Jackson. He's awesome, baby.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. It is so great to have you here with us today on this Friday, October 10th, 2025, as Locked On Blue Devils is your one-stop shop where we discuss everything going on inside the life of Duke athletics. We talk a lot about men's basketball and football and dabble into some other sports from time to time as well. On today's show, super thrilled to bring on a good friend, the play-by-play voice of the Duke Blue Devils, David Shumate, will be here to reminisce a little bit on the amazing Final Four run that Duke had. And here we are. All of a sudden, a new season is upon us for Duke basketball. Duke football off to a great start as well. So glad that you're with us. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free, wherever it is that you get your podcast. Go ahead and leave us a 5-star rating and written review. Also, watch our show each and every day on YouTube. Like this video, share it with your friends as your support means so much to us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. So, without further ado, here he is, David Shumate, back with us once again. David, it is so great to see you, my friend. How are things going in your world?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on. We're getting ready to get into that busy but fun time of year, right? Football's off to a good start and basketball's getting underway with Countdown this past weekend. And we'll be here with the exhibition season before long and that crazy non-conference schedule before too long after that. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, David, you look at the schedule, man, this is the earliest some of those things have taken place, right? The earliest that we've had Countdown to craziness and media days even for the ACC. And here we are trying to kind of finally feel like you're getting into a rhythm in football season, and boom, here's basketball.
No, for sure. And in some respects, it's probably a good thing with what the Blue Devils have in front of them, as I mentioned, with this challenging non-conference slate, starting with Texas on a Tuesday night, and then those midweek games, after that are all going to be really good in November, even kind of a cool trip to West Point to take on Army, and then you got Kansas and Arkansas, and then you get out in November and you've got that Florida-Michigan State swing. So it's going to be a crazy ride to start the year, but I think it's a nice touch that they have Countdown behind them now and can look ahead. We're a little less than 2 weeks away from Johnny Dawkins coming back to Cameron Indoor Stadium for that exhibition game with UCF. And then to me, which is an intriguing matchup, I know it's an exhibition game, but I think it'll be a good test for Jon Scheyer's group to go on the road in the exhibition season and take on Tennessee, given the high caliber competition they have right out of the chute. So to me, it's fascinating to watch this preseason. To your point, it feels like we've got a long way, but, we're inside of 4 weeks until the regular season getting started.
Yeah, it's fun because we've had these basketball conversations the last few days, and you get the chance to hear from Scheyer and Caleb Foster, Malik Brown, and looking ahead to this season. And now they kind of get to go into kind of quiet mode again, where there aren't cameras. You've got these 12, 11 days until you're back in exhibition play to sort of figure those things out. But before we go any further with this year's current squad, it's our first chance, getting a chance to catch up with you since the end of what was an amazing 24-25 season. And this week, it was really special to hear Coach Scheyer reflect a little bit on that year before you fully go into a new season, and just kind of the heartbreak that they felt at the end of it, a little further removed from that Houston loss. Easier to appreciate what Duke was able to do, but still, just it's a season that is going to eat at so many, I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that is the thing that makes the tournament incredible, but also in some respects makes it brutal. And that, if you look at all the advanced metrics, Duke had the chance to be the best team in the country for long stretches of the year, was the best team in the country. But as the saying goes, on in the tournament on any given night, different stuff can happen. And obviously, that Houston game was a bitter way to end the season with how the team played all year long. What was it? 35 wins, an 18th trip to the Final Four, 23rd ACC title. So there was a lot to like. But yeah, that anytime you lose in the tournament, it's never fun. When you lose in the Final Four, it's doubly painful. But I think as time moves on, we'll look back at that group and think about how special they were. 5 more NBA draft picks, and obviously Cooper Flagg going number 1 overall. Just a really special group. And I think we'd be remiss if we haven't talked a little bit about what Jon Scheyer has done now in his first 3 seasons. We mentioned 2 ACC titles, a trip to the Final Four, 89 wins in 3 years, and that ties him for the most in Division I history in your first 3 seasons. And he's the only guy in the Power Four that's done that. I mean, given, everyone talked about the shoes that he had to fill when he stepped into that job, he knew what he was getting into. But to succeed at that incredibly high level, to me, is something I don't think Duke fans take for granted, but probably needs to get shouted out every now and then. As I said, an incredible season. Wish it could have gone one more game and get that title, but just a really, really special group. And it's been fun to watch, this new group. Everyone kind of looks ahead to the future as they have time to watch this new group, get some work in. The Boozer twins have been fun to watch. The returning guys, Isaiah Evans, has been fun to watch here in the preseason. He just looks bigger to me. Yeah. And obviously can shoot the basketball incredibly well. Patrick Gungba is going to be a load inside. Dame Sarr, what he brings to the table. There's just a lot of different pieces to this team that makes it really intriguing as we go into the preseason.
You're reflecting on Jon Scheyer's first 3 years. It doesn't make sense in so many ways that you're following the best of all time to do this thing. And when in sports, have you really been able to see a succession plan pulled off like this, right? And then you're right that you're tying this Division I record. Nobody else is doing it at the top of the sport. And for him to pull it off the way he has and make it just it's awesome. I think one of the greatest compliments to give Coach Scheyer through all of this was that it still feels so much like Duke basketball. And at the same time, it feels so much like Jon Scheyer's version of this as opposed to Coach K.
And I think it speaks, one, to his humility in stepping into the role and knowing what he was accepting. And you talked about it media days. I saw a couple interviews. He's the first to credit Coach K in doing that, and the plan that he had of that year, so to speak, where Coach Scheyer had a chance to get his feet underneath them, his recruiting class, think about his staff, how he wanted to structure it. And also Coach K has been there as an advisor to him, but given him the space to build the program and how he needs to develop as a head coach. Talking about Jon Scheyer, it's been really cool to see up close. And that being said, you mentioned one of the other things that Coach said at Media Day that was striking to me is that he understands that when you're in that job, whether it be a Final Four, whether it be a national championship, it's never enough. And that's okay. I mean, that's what comes with being at Duke and the expectations and, what this program is about. And he's comfortable with that. It's not something that hangs over his head. It's something he's constantly chasing. And obviously this year they're going for a national championship again because that is the standard that they hold themselves to as much as the fan base or anybody outside the program would do. But no, his ability to do that, as you said, to me has been very impressive because you just can't really point to many examples, forget which sport you're talking about, where someone has followed a legend like that. And as you said, it just feels like it's kept on rolling.
I so desperately want to find an example. I don't know that you can. There's always a guy between the guy until it clicks again. And for Duke, that's just not the case that this has happened. So credit to Coach Scheyer and credit to, your starting 5 gets drafted. That makes everything a whole lot easier when you look at the 39 total games that Duke was able to play a season ago. And for you personally, David, to be the play-by-play voice that so many Duke fans are listening to throughout this run, so many high moments, so many games in which it doesn't feel like you have to deliver this amazing game-winning shot call because we're in cruise control and things are feeling so good through the second half. What was that like to follow along and be in the moments for a full season?
That's a great point. I mean, you look, I've been a part of some incredible game-ending situations and things like this, and this team had a few of those. But as you said, for most of the year, it was dominance. And to me, there's something to appreciate about excellence and the way that they played the game and the way that they execute and the way they played to their standard. I mean, you're looking at historical stuff in terms of assist to turnover ratio, offensive efficiency. I remember back when the team was out winning at Arizona, that there was an ongoing conversation about, okay, the defense looks really good, but when is the offense going to come along? And then you get to the end of the season, it's the best offense in the country by some measure. So to see these guys, whether they be young or old, with Tyrese Proctor being in the mix or Cooper Flagg and what he brought to the table, Sion James, Kaman Malawach, obviously Con Knipple being a part of that, to see them evolve through the course of the season and continue to push themselves, it was just really a treat to watch up close the standard that they played to. And you never take for granted when you get to watch a guy like Cooper Flagg and all the statistics he put out there, leading the team in just about every category for most of the season. It's just a very unique player that set the tone for everything. And one of those seasons that you just won't take for granted. And obviously I have a chance to be a part of a couple of those and document a couple of those over the years. But that was a very, very special group that played an incredibly high level all year long and will be looked upon as one of the best teams in Duke history, in my mind.
From the dunk against Pittsburgh to absolutely taking over games in the NCAA tournament, as runs against Arizona and Alabama there down the stretch, and kind of listening to it was always amazing afterwards. I'm like, I got to listen to what Shumate called on this action and just the highlights that are out there and that sort of thing. So a whole lot of fun, David, for this past season. And hopefully we've got more exciting memories to create for this upcoming year for Duke basketball, with 5 guys returning, 5 freshmen set to make a big-time impact. So I really want to dive into that here in just a moment, as Locked On Blue Devils will continue for you guys in just a moment. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at DoorDash. It's almost the weekend, and it's time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every single Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more time every time you order. These players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it all down. Each and every week, we highlight Duke football, of course, and for Duke football, how can you not talk about Darren Mensah delivering in such a big way out west with so many friends and family there, making the California trip in his home state. Mensah delivers in a big-time way for Duke football. When the pressure was on, he came through. No hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching week after week, this performance wasn't a fluke. Darren Mensah is on a streak. And just like he's been delivering for Duke football, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays with DoorDash Streaks. You save every Saturday you order, stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through November 18th. DoorDash is a proud sponsor of the Locked On Podcast Network. Let's keep this thing rolling. We've got David Shumate, the play-by-play voice of Duke football and basketball, and talking about the upcoming season here on the men's basketball side of things for the Blue Devils. 5 guys returning. Not a single scholarship player enters the transfer portal. You can count on one hand, David, the number of schools that are in this position where nobody entered the transfer portal that you've got in your scholarship mix. It's insane when you think about the level that Duke basketball is playing at, and here you are with 5 guys from a Final Four team that are coming back.
Yeah, and it's a credit to those guys, right? I was actually talking with Coach Scheyer about this earlier today at an event, and you think about those guys. Look, it's well known here at Duke that when these conversations happen in the offseason about, whether you come back, whether you go pro, potentially in the case of a guy like Isaiah Evans, and what's next in your career, there are no promises laid out in terms of playing time, starting roles, and things like that. The only promise laid out is the opportunity to compete. And those guys know that, and you got to give them credit that they wanted to come compete and be a part of what Duke is building here. And now a chance to really step forward. A guy like Isaiah Evans in his sophomore season, we saw what Darren Harris can do in the three-point competition at Countdown. Was it 17 in a row that he made to wrap that up? And Patrick Gungbo, who really was a guy down the stretch that really popped to me with his physicality inside and his ability to score. And then Malik Brown, to me, it's going to be fun to watch him this year because we all know what happened with the shoulder, and he was dinged up and chose to kind of postpone surgery so that he could play whenever he could. He's diving on the floor at the Final Four and just shows you what he is as a competitor. And I know recently he had a little something cleaned up in his knee, so they're hoping to get him back to practice here in the next week or so to get him ready to go for the outset of the season. That gives you a defensive piece. And then the guy I'm going to save for last, a guy like Caleb Foster, who's seen a little bit of everything in his time here at Duke. From 2 years ago, we're talking about an injury at the end of the season that robs him of a chance to play in the NCAA tournament. And then last year, starts the season as a starter and then comes off the bench for a large chunk of the season and then really comes to life down the stretch and was a key part of that NCAA tournament run. You want to talk about someone with some mental fortitude. I'm really excited to see what he does this season as one of the clear leaders for this team. So, you combine that with another top-ranked recruiting class, which is always a piece of the puzzle here. And to me, it's fascinating to see the depth that this team is going to bring to the table. And look, it's not a carbon copy of last year. This team is totally different. But when you start to look at the length in particular of what they can do and what they're going to be able to do in and around the basket, when you think about Boozer and you think about Gungba and you think about Brown, you start to see some of the defensive contours that are really becoming a hallmark of Jon Scheyer's tenure.
Yeah, I mean, look, you list off all the players on the roster and you go and look at how tall they are. And once again, it's everybody on scholarship, 6'4", 6'5", or taller, and it's the tallest team in America last season, and here you are in a very similar position. Wild that could be the case when Kaman Malawach is not on your roster anymore, right? When a guy like that adds so much height and versatility, but positional size seems to be such a big factor in how Jon Scheyer likes to build his teams.
Yeah, there's no question across the board. And, we talk about Slim. I mean, Isaiah Evans with his length on the perimeter, what he can do defensively, the quickness, the athleticism of Caleb Foster, what he can do on the perimeter. So, I mean, we can go on down the list, as you said, and talk about each individual guy, but all of the pieces are there. And now you also on the offensive end, last year, obviously there were a bunch of driver and slashers and guys that could hang out above the rim and Malawach, but you've got a couple of guys who can really play with their back to the basket when you think about Cam Boozer and what he can do offensively. And obviously we saw what Gungba did at the end of last year. So that gives you another wrinkle to this offense in a way that'll make this team a little bit different.
All right, so I want to talk about this Duke team going into a new season because we've talked about the players. It's also important to kind of highlight the coaching staff that's been put in place for Duke. Pretty significant when your top assistant is now going to be coaching another team within the ACC. He gets the head coaching job, and some of the changes that have taken place. Kind of catch us up to speed there. What do you make of the staff that Scheyer's been able to put together?
And he's not alone, right? I mean, Jay Lucas heads off to Miami, head coach Justin Robinson, who've been involved in player development. He's now with the Lakers in the professional ranks. Emil Jefferson didn't leave that long ago to go work for the Celtics. Zach Marcus, who's been a key part of their scouting and video operations, is now in the Toronto Raptors organization as a coach. And now you get a chance to see some new guys come in. Evan Brads comes in, who's been in the NBA for a while, a couple of different organizations, really strong player development background. Tyler Thornton is back on campus. And Jace McCain, who's been around for the last couple of years, is going to get involved in a full-time role in player development. To me, it's really interesting the way he's constructed his staff in this era where you look at, revenue sharing and NIL and everything that goes into that. Recruiting is obviously still front and center. But then you also look at how are you developing guys. And you mentioned all the retention, the guys that are coming back, I think has always been important, but maybe a little bit more so important in this era because you have to get your development work done so quickly and get ready to go at the outset of the season. So the emphasis on that to me is really fascinating. And then I sound crazy and you might laugh at me, but you're starting to look at the Jon Scheyer coaching tree that's starting to sprout a little bit. I know he's in his 4th year as a head coach, but I just listed off all those guys that are going to the NBA ranks and the college ranks. Pretty incredible what guys that have been able to come here and do, and then to go on and further their careers. And I think it's really cool that, Jon Scheyer kind of welcomes them taking those opportunities to take the next step in their careers. So it's kind of cool to see those guys, take their next step. But I'm also interested to see what some of the new pieces on the staff come in. And I know he's still here, but do want to shout out Emmanuel Dildy, who's been elevated to an associate head coach now alongside Chris Carrawell. So you still have some consistency in the coaching staff as well.
Well, and let me, if I may, add another piece to the puzzle that I certainly have heard you be complimentary of in your years there with Duke. 2+ decades, you've got Will Stevens making sure these guys are in top. You already complimented what we've seen so far from just the work that Duke has done in the weight room. That's something I think that it's easy to forget about when it's been the same for so long. You don't want that to be the case when you're bringing in the new guy, right? And it seems like Preston Green has hit the ground running right away.
Yeah, and obviously he's incredibly experienced, a bunch of different stops in the college landscape, most recently at Clemson. And Will Stevens, you want to talk about following Coach K. Will Stevens is a legend here. When the guys come back to campus, he's the first guy they see. We're actually talking with Coach Scheyer the other night about that at his first radio show this year. And Will Stevens was his strength coach back in the day. And he's kind of been one of the through lines. And he's still with the athletic department, just taking a step back of working with the basketball program full time. And he's kind of given Preston Green the space to come in and build his own way of doing things. And they've got the guys flipping tires in the off season. I'm sure you've seen the videos, pulling cars. some of that non-traditional work that to me is cool, and some of that strongman work, and you see some of the benefits of that. So it's been really cool to see that take shape as well. It's, you see it up close, right? There's nutritionists, there's all sorts of things now. These are like really finely tuned athletes, and it's become a year-round endeavor so that they're primed and ready to compete at the highest level. We kind of start paying attention fully this time of year because the practices start and the games start coming, but they've really been working since early July, with all the work they've done in the weight room.
Yeah, you could tell. I mean, the bodies, the way they look, and just the grind that you're going to have to go through throughout the course of a college season is really impressive, and excited to see what Duke basketball is going to be able to do on the hardwood this year. I know that I don't want to speak for you, but it feels like it's safe to put kind of high expectations out there on a team. Duke never shies away from things like that, and I'm just ready to kind of see this team get after it.
Yeah, no question. And the standard is the standard. The standard here is to compete for championships. Jon Scheyer would be the first person to tell you that's their ultimate goal, is to get to Indianapolis, where he's got some fond memories, obviously, and have a chance to win a title this year. They know the work that's ahead of them. I mean, obviously, the new wrinkles this year, they're going to be fascinating. I know I'm sure you've talked about this a bunch with the 18-game ACC schedule. So now you've got 13 non-conference games to play with, and that's one of the reasons they were able to stack the non-conference slate. We kind of ran through the early portion, but you still got Texas Tech around Christmas time, and then that game against Michigan in February, a la what they did last year against Illinois. So to me, the non-conference schedule is fascinating. And then the way this 18-game schedule comes together, be interested to see what the preseason polls look like when they come out for the ACC. But I think Duke is going to likely be at the top, and Louisville is going to be nearby. So I don't think it's any accident that the Blue Devils are going to get Louisville twice in addition to Carolina. So it'll be fascinating to see the ACC race this year, because I do think a lot of programs in the league are going to take a step forward as well.
All right. I'm excited. Basketball is going to be here right around the corner like we talked about. What we're enjoying right now, though, is a really great start to the football season for Manny Diaz and company. So let's step aside for one more timeout, and then we'll start to wrap up our conversation with David Shumate here when Locked On Blue Devils continues in a moment. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at Mazda. For Mazda, we're talking about the big moments and moving the game forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, move culture, and keep moving the game forward. This week's moment of the game that moves the game forward is Duke's football response, a 21-7 deficit for Duke football against Cal, and they find a way to dig deep, step up with some young players, making big-time plays and pulling out a victory. Duke now 3-0 in ACC play. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move or be moved, a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Our show today is also brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel's got an offer for you that you don't want to miss. Really fun and exciting NFC East matchup last night that we saw between the Eagles and the Giants. Now with FanDuel, you can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Let's stay right here in the state. The Panthers still haven't lost at home. They'll play on Sunday against the Dallas Cowboys. Right now, FanDuel has Dallas favored by 3.5 points. Go get in on the action over at FanDuel. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the app today and get started. FanDuel is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Okay, here we go. Our last segment today on the program. I've got David Shumate here, the play-by-play voice of Duke football and men's basketball. So talking football now, it's a 4-2 Duke football team. We're halfway through this 2025 season, David. And if you kind of divide it up into quarters of the season, this second quarter that Duke finished up happened to be all league games. And it's really hard to find blemishes with the start in ACC play for Duke.
No, and it's been a story of two segments, as you're saying, really defined by the turnover margin when you think about it. If you look at those first 3 games or so, 5 turnovers against Illinois, it was a wash in the game against Tulane, and now in league play, Duke is plus 11, and they haven't turned it over. I'm knocking on every piece of wood I can find. You don't want to jinx anything, but sometimes football is really complicated. Sometimes it's fairly simple. They've started to get the takeaways that this defense is known for, and you start to look at some of the categories where Manny Diaz's defense has been known for. They lead the ACC, I believe, in sacks at this point. The TFLs are really coming along. Obviously, it was a monster game at Cal. I think it was like 6 sacks and 13 TFLs in that regard, and that's the root of what this team wants to do. And you combine that with an offense that at times has looked unstoppable in ACC play with Darren Mensah and the emergence of Nate Shepard, the talented freshman running back out of Louisiana. Anderson Castle's been a piece of it. And Cooper Barkett, I think, is the second leading receiver in ACC play. They're averaging up over 40 points per game in league action. So, I mean, it's hard to really nitpick too much right now. And they're doing all of this, as I'm sure you know, really devastated by injuries in the linebacker room, in particular with Nick Morris done for the year. Kendall Johnson hasn't played the last couple of games, and it was kind of a nightmare at Cal in that regard. You go out, Trey Freeman goes out in like the first series, 3 plays in.
Yep.
He is done. The backup Will linebacker, Bradley Gompers, a true freshman, gets ejected for targeting not too long after that. And Luke Mergott's got to slide over and play the Will. And here comes Elliott Shopper to play the Mike linebacker spot, and he just has a career night, a couple of sacks and an interception. But that's a credit to Jonathan Packey, the defensive coordinator, and obviously Manny Diaz, that they have them playing at such a high level, and the belief that they have, even with some young guys in key spots. They've been playing awfully well, and I think there's a temptation at times for some people to go, shoulda, coulda, woulda. What would have happened with those Illinois and Tulane games if they've gone differently? But maybe those were foundational pieces that this team went through that's allowed them to learn some lessons, albeit the hard way, and now take a step forward in ACC play and be playing really, really well headed in their bye week into, I'm sure we'll talk about, kind of the standalone game with Georgia Tech bracketed by their 2 byes.
Yeah, I think when you look at what Duke was able to pull off this past Saturday, you can't be anything but incredibly impressed from the linebacker depth that you're talking about, finding yourself in that 21-7 hole. I thought it was so wild the late night that we had Saturday, watching this thing unfold out on the West Coast. And you're there, of course, calling all the action. But in between quarters, ESPN's asking Manny Diaz what's going on over here defensively. And he's talking about drawing up plays on the sidelines for so many guys. This is while Duke's down multiple touchdowns, David. And then, okay, let's just draw it up every time, I guess, if that's what ends up happening there defensively, and the offense to click like they did. I mean, wow.
Well, and coaches, they love when their team responds to adversity like that. I mean, it's 21-7. Cal's got over 200 yards of offense, and the Blue Devils are up against it. And then you go down and score, you get a turnover, you score again. And, going into halftime, reel off 24 in a row to go up 10, 31-21, and then obviously go on to win the ball game by 24 points. But you look up at the end of the game, Cal only had something like 270 yards of offense. So they only had like 50 yards of offense in total after those first 3 series, and without a lot of key pieces. And they just cut it loose and said, let's go play, and started to get some turnovers. It was 4 interceptions in total, and really dictated the terms of the ball game. And obviously the complementary stuff that we've seen offensively. And Darren Mensah is so efficient. He's so good. He leads just about every category for quarterbacks in the ACC. But I do think it's striking as well that Duke's passing yardage per game has actually gone down every game this season as the rushing game has emerged, and the balance that they really, really like. And you look at these last 3 games, they have more rushing attempts than passing attempts. For a lethal passing attack, that's a really nice thing to bring along with you with the rushing game they've had of late.
Trust me, David, I've been watching, because I'm all the passing stats. Like, I just want the numbers to keep climbing, and definitely celebrating all the takeaways. But then I'm the guy that's looking and I'm like, wait a minute, this field position battle here, there's not as many yards to rack up offensively when you're having to start in opposing territory against the opposite, where sometimes, in the earlier games of the season, Duke was having to put together those 80, 90-yard touchdown drives.
Well, you and the head coach, I mean, he talked about that explicitly with the NC State game in particular, where I think NC State had more yardage than Duke did. Yeah, when you got to go the whole length of the field, you're going to have more yardage, and Duke had some short fields to work with. So sometimes the stats belie that, evidenced by, I'm fairly certain, in the games against Illinois and Tulane, Duke had more total yardage than Illinois and Tulane, and a lot of that's because you're coming from behind and you're throwing it all over the place trying to get back into the ball game. So to me, the run game has been the story, and like I said, the emergence of Nate Shepard and his explosiveness has been a huge piece of it offensively.
All right, so tell me about this as we wrap here, this next stretch that Duke's got, right? You look at this big Georgia Tech game, an undefeated squad who's had so many close calls in their own right already. And then the next time you've got a bye week, and then Clemson, and just where we're at with Duke as they go into this next stretch of the season.
Yeah, I mean, you start to look at, and you don't want to look too far ahead, and the coaches
Sure.
would kill any of us for doing this.
Way easier for us to do it. Yeah.
No, but you start to look at how these tiebreaker scenarios are emerging, because there's no longer divisions in the ACC, right? Everyone's stacked up, 1 through 17. So you're going to have some tiebreakers, and you start to look at the rest of the way. Duke obviously controls their own destiny because they don't have a conference loss, but even beyond that, they host Georgia Tech and Virginia. And if you look at the current standings, those are two teams that figure to be in the mix at the end of the season to try to get to Charlotte. I think a lot of people think Miami is going to be there, and with good reason, the way they played here early in the season. But if you can get those two home wins, you're looking really good in terms of tiebreaker scenarios towards the tail end of the season. Now, Georgia Tech is going to be a handful. I mean, we know what Haynes King is about and what he can do running the football. So there will certainly be a challenge there, but I think it's a challenge that this defensive front for the Blue Devils certainly welcomes. And when you look at the statistics, I know Tulane was a little bit of an outlier there. Duke's run defense has been really stout. I mean, there have been some 3rd and longs where they've given up some things, but the last couple of weeks, they've really kind of locked it down up front, particularly on primary running downs, 1st and 2nd. And I think against Georgia Tech, that's going to be awfully important, particularly with how much they mix in the quarterback.
Excited to see it all unfold. Big game coming up for Duke next weekend. I hope people take the opportunity to enjoy a little downtime this weekend. The rest of the college football slate, you don't have to worry about the blood pressure getting elevated during these big Duke football moments and so much more. David, I can't say thank you enough for the time. I do want people to be aware of the Blue Devil Network coverage. How can they best get involved? How can they support you along the way?
No, appreciate it. We'll be back over at our home, the Washington Golf Club, on Tuesday night, talking with Coach, getting ready for the game against Georgia Tech. That'll be on from 7 to 8 o'clock. You can check it out on the Duke Football Facebook page, or obviously listen along our network with all of our local affiliates and on the Varsity Network app. And then on Saturday, we'll get going at 10:30 ahead of a noon kick against Georgia Tech. I like the noon kicks. I like the night games. I think it's good to get up and go play. We've covered, I think, the entire spectrum of kick times this year. We've noon, 4, 8, 10:30. Prepping us for basketball when I think the Cal game is like at 11 o'clock or something like that.
Man, it's going to be fun, and we'll be listening to you along the way. David, thanks for doing this. It's great to see you.
Appreciate it. It's great to see you as well.
All right, that's David Shumate. He's joining us here on this episode of Locked On Blue Devils. That brings us to a close here today. We appreciate everybody for their support. As always, be sure to go listen to David Shumate's coverage. That brings us to the end of another week here at Locked On Blue Devils. Subscribe to us wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you on Monday. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.